Effectively securing your organization and its reputation requires a smarter approach. To maximize efficiency and minimize risk, security experts turn to LogRhythm, the only leading solution built solely for security teams by a security team committed to your success. With NextGen SIEM, user and entity behavior analytics, network traffic and behavior analysis, security automation and orchestration, and compliance, LogRhythm provides security made smarter. The greatest threat to businesses today isn't the outsider trying to get in. It's the people you trust, the ones who already have the keys, your employees, your contractors, and privileged users. 60% of online attacks are carried out by insiders. To stop these insider threats, you need to see what users are doing before an incident occurs. Observe It combats insider threats by detecting risk activity, investigating in minutes, effectively responding, and stopping data lost. Give it a test drive at observeit.com/securityweekly. Today's determined attackers easily bypass even the most advanced network defenses. Trying to ramp up staff to detect their backdoors can cost thousands of dollars and take months, even years. With Active Countermeasures AI Hunter, we enable junior analysts to detect even the most advanced backdoors in a matter of hours. Sign up for a demo and purchase our product today by visiting activecountermeasures.com/ESW. Active Countermeasures. Make every analyst a hunter.
Well, welcome back everyone to Enterprise Security Weekly. I guess those listening to the audio can't see my Halloween hacker mask.
Yeah, got that beautiful. If we do this whole segment with the mask on, I'm gonna lose it.
No, I can't, because I can't smoke my cigar with the mask on. So, and it sounds really bad. But my kids bought this mask and they call it the hacker mask because there's some YouTube channel that like talks about hackers and they wear the mask and they're like, "That is the YouTube channel like hacker mask." I'm like, "No, that's the guy." And they're like, "No, it's the YouTube channel." I'm like, "No, like anonymous." They're like, "What are you talking?" I'm like, "All right, everyone sit down. We're going to have a history hacker lesson right now." And I explained it to them. And they still call it that YouTube channel hacker mask. In any case, welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. It's Halloween, where we get to wear masks.
That's
wow, better.
I can breathe now and smoke, which is good. So yeah, we've got some news to cover. I think we want to kind of pre-announce our news for Security Weekly.
Yeah, we should.
We've been doing a lot of teasing.
Have you?
About that, yeah. I've been teasing certain people to look for the announcement. And since our announcement will come out tomorrow, largely this will be published tomorrow. There are live stream listeners, but they get the inside scoop that Matt Alderman is joining Security Weekly as the CEO.
Thank you.
I will transition into the CTO role, which is going to be awesome.
It's going to be great. You know, I've always loved the show. You know, we did a lot of work together at Tenable, together and got connected with the Security Weekly podcast. You know, Layered Insight was a sponsor, and it's a great honor to come over and help you 100% and grow this thing. Because
yeah, I was picking you up from your hotel this morning. I was thinking when we worked together at Tenable, Matt would come to the studio to hang out. We'd work on Tenable stuff here in the studio. So
and do a show and do
yeah.
And
now Matt is 100% Security Weekly.
I am.
It's going to be a lot of fun. Matt's going to focus on the business and the industry side of Security Weekly, which will give me more time to focus on security research and the community side. So I think it's just a great usage of our respective skills, which is funny because we can both cover each side of that, right? But I think it's a matter of what we like to do and where our major focus is. So.
Yeah, I mean, it gives us the opportunity to kind of divide and conquer a little bit, right? Figure out how to grow the industry side of what Security Weekly does and allow you to focus more on the community research side and continue to bring those two together.
Yeah.
Right? I think the value of what Security Weekly brings is the ability to bring the security industry aspects into the community, help the community make the right decisions on how to protect their environment. And by having the two of us here now, you know, I can take parts of that, you can take parts of that, and we get a little more scale out of what we can do for the listeners and for you know, our partners.
What I love, and you had said this recently, is, you know, we could go work for an enterprise or have a business that tailors to the community and help the community, or one particular business in the community. We could also have a business that we go work for a particular vendor. Obviously, we both work for Tenable, right? We could go work for a startup and help them. But doing it all here at Security Weekly, we get to help everyone, which is great. Help a lot of companies, help a lot of people, you know.
We kind of get the best of both worlds, right? When I was, you know, I've been officially unemployed for a couple weeks. You know, we'll talk about the Layered Insight news in a little bit. And, you know, a lot of people approached me including you, and I looked at it and I said, well, I could go to a security company and, get another startup, to another
level, right?
Another level, another
sure.
exit point, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about the industry. Or I could come here and I could do that for a lot of companies instead of just one, right? I've been in-house the last number of jobs. I enjoyed my advisory practice and helping startups kind of build their message, understand their aligned strategy, the product roadmap, etc. And so I could do that for one company, but man, here we can do it for lots of companies. And I think that's the beauty of the two of us, really driving Security Weekly forward, is we can help a lot of people, and to me that's more fun right now where I'm in my career. And so yeah, this can be a fun
It
ride.
plays to my slight ADD too, right? So I don't necessarily have to be focused on one company or one one particular aspect of it. We've got lots of different companies in lots of different categories, which we've been taking on a lot more analyst briefings. And talking about someone on the show. In fact, if there's any overlap in our news with a briefing that I've taken, I'll go into more detail about what I learned. But it's been really cool for me as I sit in all these briefings to learn about the technology and the strategy and all these different companies with all these different really cool solutions, and then being able to cherry pick them and be like, oh, I like that one. Maybe they'll do a briefing with us. And as we kind of grow up as Security Weekly, that started in my basement from today, now we have those opportunities. Which it's been really cool. Been really cool.
And to me, it's about making sure people can differentiate what they're doing. The market's so confusing right now. There's so many new vendors, new technologies, etc. How do you get the word out? How do you let people know what you do? Do I need, in our last segment, right? We were talking about endpoint protection, endpoint detection response. There's a lot of vendors in that space. Who are the ones that will really help me secure my environment better, right? And we get to do that now across the entire security landscape. And to me, that's the fun in trying to figure out how all these pieces fit together to build enterprise security programs for our listeners so that they can protect their networks, their endpoints, their applications, all of it, right, across the board.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we want to start with the Layered Insight news?
Yeah, we should absolutely start there.
Yeah, so
I feel it's for everyone else. It's new news. You and I have been talking about it for several weeks now.
We have, right? Anybody who's gone through an acquisition knows that the process isn't short. It takes a little while. So, we kind of stayed under the covers for a while, but Qualys officially announced the acquisition of Layered Insight yesterday prior to the earnings call. I think it's a great acquisition for the founders.
It's very
for
strategic.
The employees. Super strategic. I mean, Qualys already had a container security offering. They were using a sidecar approach to kind of look for vulnerabilities and configuration in their container security product. The acquisition of Layered Insight will now allow them to provide runtime protection capabilities.
Which is so important.
Yeah, to me, this is where the future of security is going as we think about the containerized application and distributing.
But let's frame that, though. That's something you set in my mind early on. When I thought of container security, I thought of the scanning solutions. Like, I have a container, I'm going to scan it, and it's going to tell me about all the vulnerabilities. And you were kind of like, yeah, that's just table stakes. Like, yeah, you need that. But what happens as the containers are running? How do you protect them? You're like, that's where it's more interesting. And that's why I think Qualys is a huge gain in that, because now they have that ability to protect the containerized infrastructure at runtime.
No, exactly right. The static analysis of the container is table stakes. Don't get me wrong. It is an important part of the build process and making sure they're configured and no critical vulnerabilities are in those containers. But there's so much that happens when the container starts to run that nobody has really good visibility into. Layered Insight had a very differentiated, unique approach by embedding security in the container itself, so it can monitor all that activity from within the container. It is truly unique technology. You add that into the rest of the Qualys portfolio, I think it is a game changer in the market when we start thinking about what the broader AppSec and container security market's going to look like.
And your tech people, John Kinsella specifically, was someone who I got to know. And I was like, dude, how long you been doing containers? I'm like, were they even invented when you were doing containers? I was like, I have so many questions, and he is awesome. So just a wealth of knowledge in that space, tons of experience, and trying to find people like John that have that level of experience with containers is difficult because it hasn't been something that we've talked about maybe for the past year in security, right?
Right.
But it's been around much longer.
Oh, it's been around a while. Yeah.
The roots are really in some of the early DevOps movements. And it was awesome to talk with John and gain those insights, you know.
Yep. John's taken over VP of Engineering at Qualys for the Container Security product line. Asif Awan is taking over the CTO role for Container Security. There is going to be an emphasis at Qualys around the container security. They see that as that emerging market they need to go after. Like I said, this was a really good marriage for the layered insight team.
Qualys hasn't made too many acquisitions, more very recently. I think when we were tracking the industry a couple of years ago at Tenable, they weren't making as many acquisitions, but they've stepped up in that.
Traditionally, Qualys kind of built capabilities themselves. They have done some key acquisitions this year. They did some stuff on the passive network side. This is a pretty big acquisition for them in the container security space. You may see more from them in the future. We'll see. But, you know, the beauty of Qualys is this platform that allows them to plug in other technologies and expand that offering to their existing customers. They don't have to go out and look for another product to do something when they already have Qualys in-house. So yeah, I think this is it was really good acquisition at the end of the day.
It fits their model.
It does.
I mean, their cloud architecture is their number one you know, strength, I think, in the market.
Yeah, and if we think about where the industry is going, we've talked about this, right? As the technology is moving more stuff into the cloud, you're using container as a service, serverless offerings. The ability to have technology that snaps into those new environments gives them a leg up over their competition because they can run in Fargate, they can run in ACI, they can run in these environments that some of the other solutions won't, which I think is great for them, and it gives them a lot more to offer now to a customer, and that yeah, I'm glad the announcement came out yesterday. We've been kind of sitting on it for a couple weeks waiting for it to get out.
It's really cool. Other announcements, as I hit the wrong button in my browser, Ping Identity has launched what they call a Quickstart private sandbox. I was like, what the heck is that? Essentially, it's for, I believe, banks specifically that are carrying out transactions. Basically, Ping, like a bunch of their products, so Ping Federate, Ping Access, and Ping Directory, they set up basically an example where you can go set up this sandbox, essentially, have a suite of Ping products in there and test your e-commerce. And this is very specific to the open banking's read-write data API specifications, what they say it is, but very specific to banking, to meet, I'm certain, what is regulatory requirements for banks that are above and beyond, you know, PCI, because a bank is not necessarily a merchant. I was having that discussion this week too, like what's, you know, the difference, and there's certainly different regulations, and this sounds like a way that you can test stuff before you implement it to become compliant and have better security around your e-commerce and transactions for banking.
Yep, exactly. And you know, in this particular case, this is just a natural extension of Ping's identity services and leveraging that for the consumers. We're going to see more mobile banking applications and other ways to transact financially, and putting more protections around those are always a good thing. You know, I don't even run a mobile banking app. I don't trust them yet, right? I don't. You know, that's
going to change though. There's going to be so many less actual physical branches in the future. I think it's been a very slow progression to that,
right?
Mostly because of the security.
The security around it. Because think about a mobile app, right? Back to our container discussion. These mobile apps are communicating via APIs to a microservice and a cloud. Are those API connections secured appropriately? Can somebody hack into them and get into that stream, which is why I don't use them. I think that over time that becomes more secure. This is a set of capabilities that helps to improve aspects of that, to hopefully secure those environments more, where more and more people will, like me, the old curmudgeons, will start to use them.
And I think the security vendors in the spaces to protect what you were just talking about are up and coming. API security companies, I believe I covered Salt Protection in that briefing segment that I did. They basically have a way for developers to identify any kind of vulnerabilities they're introducing in their APIs, which is awesome.
Yeah, right.
And that's locally written in-house software, primarily, what you were just describing for banking and e-commerce. And then there's another suite of vendors I know AppVision is one of the startups. Lookout in the mobile protection space. There's other mobile protection.
Yeah,
I haven't paid too much attention to that space, but what they allow is when you're developing the mobile app to be able to hook into libraries to help secure that app, even when it's running on something insecure like Android, where the ecosystem is basically a hot mess when it comes to security.
Right.
But Android still has most of the mobile share, as far as I know, which means if people are going to use that mobile app, you got to give the customer some reassurance. And by hooking into libraries and having tools available to make your app more secure, that's a whole other suite of security vendors as well. And we haven't really talked about that space so much on the show, but we'll have to do that in some upcoming episodes.
We will expand into that because it is, to me, it's part of additional application security components that have to be addressed in this new world of microservice-based architecture. These APIs now potentially become an attack vector.
Oh yeah, and pen testers have been preying upon them for a long time, and I think that we haven't had much in the way of vendors helping protect those particular, the app and the API connector before. So it's an emerging space.
Emerging.
WallArm? So have you been tracking WallArm? I know you did a briefing with T-Cell.
T-Cell, Signal Sciences.
Yep. Signal Sciences has been a sponsor of our shows for a long time.
Right.
A great team over there. I know we did an interview with ThreatX. It was a slightly different point of view.
Slightly different, yep.
In different offerings. They've got the CDN and the managed services, which I really like from ThreatX, especially if you don't have a SOC team internally that's covering that stuff. That's a great way to go. Rapid7 acquired T-Cell, which is very strategic. Right? They've got the DAS scanner they acquired through Dan Kirkendall and NT Objectives, and now they've added T-Cell into there, which is a similar... Would you put them in next generation web? There's different points of view on this. I would call it, for lack of a better term, next generation web application protection, right?
Right.
And we had traditional WAFs. We all knew that was not working. That regular expression trying to match bad stuff coming in did not work. And there's still frustrations in the industry today, in the community on that. Then we had RASP, and then IAST, and dynamic scanning was thrown kind of in there as well, and static, and all these different ways. And then there's like this whole next generation. Many of the technologies, and I won't speak for all the vendors, right? But the way that works is they're basically applying machine learning. And I know Ian called it out as well. We all know AI and machine learning are buzzwords, right? But there are companies that are using it effectively. Signal Sciences being one of them, that looks at all your HTTP requests and responses, gives you outstanding telemetry about what be happening in terms of attacks, vulnerabilities, or just operational performance, which is great. So that's what they're calling next generation WAF, which I think is doing themselves a disservice, because when I looked at it, I was like, that's nothing like a WAF. I mean, it's sort of like a WAF, but...
The way I describe WallArm, so they just took an $8 million round last week. I think they announced that last week.
They've been all in the news. They've been doing their public relations doing a fantastic job. They're just all in the news. Good for them. Not every vendor gets that level of visibility with the, a couple of, they had a product announcement and a funding round, and they've been a great job of getting it out. And
so the way I describe WallArm is kind of a DAST WAF. So it's taking dynamic testing results and then using them to put in rules in the WAF. Kind of what Qualys was doing with Web App Scanner and the WAF.
We used to call that virtual patching. And I still had issues with it because it was still trying to take advantage of a traditional WAF, which is very easily bypassed and not well suited to protect the application.
But unlike what T-Cell and Signal Sciences was doing, which was kind of the RASP components, think of this as a DAST WAF set of capabilities.
And that's their fast 2.0 announcement that was this week. That's their artificially intelligent scanner almost, but they probably don't like it when I say scanner, right?
No, yeah, probably not. I've had conversations with them as well.
Sure.
What they're trying to do is automate aspects of testing through this framework for application security testing, what they call FAST. But it is really kind of an integration of dynamic analysis and the WAF components, and figuring out, okay, how secure is that app when it comes up? And then obviously providing feedback to the developers to improve the code, but also provide protection capabilities that kind of goes through the pipeline, right? I think what you're seeing with Fast announcement is the need and this emerging need to integrate application security testing as part of the build process.
Yeah, which is hard, right?
It's got to be so tightly integrated as part of the build, as part of staging and testing, and making it more. We got to shrink those timelines.
Well, that's exactly it. When you and I are looking at web app testing tools, the time it took for scans to complete 3 years ago, there was no way it was integrating into a DevSecOps environment. There's just no way. The scans took too long. Now the market has evolved. And NetSparker is playing more in that space. Rapid7's offering is playing more in that space, and they're catching up. So like you said, Matt, that scanner, and I think the WallArm announcement actually called out, like, you can use Jenkins to kick off the scan, and it becomes part of your build process. To do that, you've got to have a scanner that can get those scan times down. Either they're doing differential scans, which NetSparker had announced as a product like 3 years ago or something. I think when we were looking at the space 3 years ago, they had that announcement, and that was great. I mean, that just helped operationalize the dynamic scanning even more. Now, as things push forward, you're seeing those scan times get even shorter and some really innovative things happening. We talk about AI and all those other things, but that's how it can fit in that build process where you're making 20 builds a day. How do you dynamically scan those apps even once a day? I mean, scans in a web app scanner back in the day would take 24 to 48 hours in some cases.
Right. I think the challenge now is DevOps teams are pushing code daily or multiple times a day.
Yeah.
And the traditional tools we've used were used to us not changing an app for weeks or months. So I could do a 24 to 48 hour scan and allow the results to come back and make fixes. That world doesn't exist in DevOps anymore. It is
not in DevOps. It still exists in application development.
In the legacy app side, right? Yeah. But if you think about DevOps and where the market's moving, stuff is happening so fast. How do I integrate testing in that process to speed up the security of the application before it gets into production? These are the types of announcements I think you're going to continue to see from the application security side to continue to embed more capabilities earlier in the dev process and just make it more streamlined.
Because you could have, I mean, we talk about DevOps, we talk about the feedback loop. And anything that's identifying a bug or vulnerability, not much difference, right? The impact might be different, but and how do you get that back to developers so they can fix it in their next build cycle, which could be
the same
in a couple of hours, right?
Could be, it could be literally within a few hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. IBM is set to acquire Red Hat.
Big news on Sunday. I got the acquisition alert right away. This is a very interesting acquisition, right? And the question I posed when it came out is, is this the death of Red Hat or is this the savior for IBM? IBM struggled. Their results weren't that good when they announced earlier this month. This acquisition is really, really interesting because is it the future of where IBM goes? IBM has acquired a lot of companies over the years, but my concern with IBM is they never fully integrated them into a product suite. It was always solutions wrapped with professional services. Now they're bringing in Red Hat, obviously Red Hat Enterprise Linux. You've got OpenShift on the container side, the CoreOS acquisition, which is also on the DevOps side. How does this transform IBM for the long haul? That's the thing that I think will be interesting to see how this plays out is how much does this transform IBM into a next generation technology company? Not necessarily a security company per se. I mean, there are some security pieces.
I think it's more of an application framework company, right? Because IBM's always had those technologies, right? They've got, I remember in 2000, working with IBM as a player in the Java, server-side Java frameworks, and they had, the database and the app server and the web server that you get from IBM. And I think this is really just an extension of that. And I think a strategic move for them is to play in this framework or infrastructure to run your applications on, right? And I think that's why they bought Red Hat was because Red Hat bought CoreOS, right? And so now to have that ecosystem, Red Hat has their own container systems.
Platform
similar to Docker is OpenShift.
It's OpenShift.
Right? So they've got a container operating system, the container engine, right, in OpenShift, And now with IBM, I mean, I think that's the future of their application.
Yeah, so
and like you said, not so much security. There's security components.
There's security components, but I think this is really strategic for IBM Cloud, who's trying to make a name for themselves in the cloud space. If I can bring in all the Red Hat components of OpenShift and CoreOS and the Kubernetes stuff they got from OpenShift,
cloud,
and bring all that into the IBM Cloud,
because
and
Red Hat doesn't have its own cloud, right?
No.
Yeah.
That creates potentially a one-stop shop.
Yeah.
For people to develop on the Red Hat platform, deploy directly into IBM Cloud. Can they now carve out a niche against AWS and Google and Azure for the cloud space? I think that's how this will.
What I thought was amazing, though, the value, which was also
This is the largest. This is like one of the largest acquisitions ever. It's $34 billion.
$34 billion, because they valued the shares at 190 per share in cash. And so basically, IBM's buying it for $34 billion.
$34 billion. Yeah, it is a huge acquisition. Huge. I think what I heard
on.
Did
you ever think that a company that has its roots in open source would then be the largest acquisition that we've ever covered on the show?
I know,
and maybe one of the largest technology acquisitions.
Ever. Yeah, it's one of the largest.
That's what amazed
ever.
me most about the whole announcement. Like, here we are talking about Red Hat as being the #1. Dollar-wise acquisition.
Think about
crazy.
Think about IBM mainframes, AIX, very closed systems to buy an open source company like Red Hat OpenShift.
And Microsoft has made similar shifts in their
GitHub,
culture too.
Yeah, exactly. And this is kind of the future where technology is going. And if IBM does this right into IBM Cloud, this only, in my opinion, speeds up the adoption of containers and deployment of applications in the cloud, which means, okay, security guys, we got to start thinking about these are the areas we have to start protecting in the future. So it could accelerate some of that. It was a very interesting acquisition.
LogRhythm has announced in its 7.4 release, which dropped yesterday, that their NextGen SIEM platform is adding SOAR capabilities, orchestration, automation, and response. Very logical move for LogRhythm. Again, sponsor of the show, but they have what I believe is one-stop shopping for organizations that have to have a SIEM along with some endpoint protection, network visibility, and now their customers aren't going to go somewhere else and buy SOAR necessarily. They've got it right built into their platform. I think it solidifies them as being that one-stop shop to get that advanced security intelligence for many organizations.
Yeah, I mean, we knew the market was going to move here, right? Yeah. I mean, we've been talking about this for years. I mean, this is stuff we were talking about at Tenable back in 14-15 is security orchestration, automation, response capabilities. Where do they sit? You know, the Phantom acquisition by Splunk. FireEye did an acquisition of Invitas before that. This is where I think you're going to see the response side of the house move, is how can I orchestrate and automate aspects of my remediation response. This makes perfect sense for them. I think they built it themselves with their own capabilities. I think you're going to continue to see some consolidation. There's not a lot of plays left, you know, in this market. But this is super logical because this is the only way we're going to attempt to stay ahead of the attacks and the hackers. And
you know, our other sponsor, DF Labs, is definitely in that space, and I think very closely tied to the forensic aspect of it, which is great. Like, if you're looking for incident response forensics and you need SOAR in there, that's a great play. I think that's a couple of companies, you know, in that kind of space. DF Labs has a great solution. I mean, the demos that I've seen from, like, that's awesome. Like, that's totally useful, right? But then you see the independent player like Demisto, Swimlane, and a couple others.
CyberSponse.
Yeah, they're still kind of floating out there. They haven't been acquired yet. And you wonder, are they going to be acquired, or are they going to grow large enough to start adding on other capabilities to have them be a player? Right?
Yeah, it could be interesting, right? Because now the question is, what's ArcSight going to do? What's RSA and NetWitness going to do? You know, because these are some of the other platforms that could use these SOA type of capabilities. Do they go pull one of these guys and bring those out? I think.
Or does a Demisto or Swimlane go grab one of the smaller players that has SIM-like capabilities?
Maybe.
That aren't as big as the large SIM players, right? But if I were them, you'd be shopping for some of these really cool vendors that can aggregate those logs and make actionable intelligence and bring that into the fold into a Demisto or a Swimlane. Right. That's where I predict the market going. I don't think they're going to survive as
they won't stand alone as a standalone
right?
SOAR. No,
yeah.
I think with what Splunk and LogRhythm have now done, it's put pressure on them. I don't think they can survive as a standalone SOAR. I think they're going to have to integrate in with something else or integrate other stuff to continue to open up their markets.
Fidelis has a report. In fact, and speaking of one-stop shopping, so I did a briefing with Fidelis. They've got a report that many organizations aren't engaging in threat hunting still today, which I think is an important activity to do. But Fidelis is that one-stop shopping as well. They just announced also their managed services from Fidelis and their products across the endpoint deception and some network visibility as well. Which is, I mean, so like if you're an organization and you're shopping for, you're confused about deception because the nuances between the deception players aren't necessarily like obvious to understand, right? And I think the perception of the deception market in general is still, it's just a traditional honeypot, which is not correct at all.
Correct.
I think there's great value to having a deception solution. And then, your endpoint, more on, I believe, the detection and response side with Fidelis, which is a tough problem to solve, right? And then getting some network visibility and telemetry and tying all three of those together, and now they've added services on, is again, like if you're an organization that you're kind of struggling with that, you can go to one place and take that off the plate of your security team, right? Let them go focus on other things, more advanced things, other security tasks that we all know that we can't get to, right? By having those solutions and outsourcing them and having some help, I think it's a great play in the market. That's why I really liked the Fidelis approach. Was I think they're going to grab those sections of the market that are looking to really outsource that.
What I liked in this article is a conversation you and I have had before, which is what is threat hunting, right? There's a lot of misconceptions of what threat hunting is and isn't. They kind of get into the differences of threat intelligence and threat detection and threat hunting. And the differences and the nuances of those, because I think a lot of people say they do threat hunting, but do they really do threat hunting, or is it really threat detection?
Yeah.
It's a really confusing term, and it's used in a lot of different ways. They try to clarify some of that, which I thought was great. So anybody who wants to understand, what are the nuances of threat hunting, this is a really good article just to kind of get your foundation, kind of your feet wet to say, oh, yeah, we're doing threat intelligence and some threat detection, but we're not really doing true threat hunting, which is more on the proactive side than just
right. Which you need that visibility into endpoints, into network.
Correct.
And then I like the addition of deception because that's a great qualifier, right? It's kind of like your threat intelligence feed qualifier. Like, I saw something suspicious on my endpoint. I saw something suspicious in my logs, and those tie together. Oh, but they trip something on the deception side. Okay, now I got to get it off to someone that can respond, right? That triggers, and same thing with threat intelligence. Like, oh, it was talking to a bad IP or exhibited behavior that I got from a threat intel feed. It just helps you qualify and prioritize your alerts. And if you can have a team that's helping you with that, now your internal security team can focus on the really advanced threats or help operationalize patch management, vulnerability management, which is always a struggle, right? And the more difficult things to necessarily outsource. I mean, the decision to, outsource or use an MSSP is different. It's the same thing, like endpoint, right? It's different for every, what you want to outsource, how you want to outsource it, what level.
Some people will outsource detection because they don't see it as strategic and want to do threat hunting in-house. The really mature organizations have the teams to do this, but not everybody has the resources to put together a threat hunting team. So if threat hunting is important, maybe you want a managed service. Maybe you want a managed service for your base vulnerability and patching, and then focus your folks on threat hunting. It's going to vary. It's going to be different for every organization. But understanding what threat hunting really is, I think, is an important piece, because I think a lot of people use it incorrectly.
McAfee's late to the party with a big step into the cloud with mVision. Essentially, it sounds like their EPO, endpoint, mobile, and EDR products are being rolled up into the cloud. So they're delivering all of those services
in the cloud.
In the cloud.
Yes. Yes. Late to the
party.
Late to the party. There's already solutions out there that are doing aspects of this. Obviously, McAfee sees the move to the cloud. Symantec saw this a while ago with the acquisition of Blue Coat and the things that Symantec's been doing with Blue Coat. McAfee's coming to the table. Question is it too little, too late? I don't know. We'll see. But they're moving in the right direction because look, guys, that's where technology's moving. So,
and I tell you what, say what you will about McAfee, though, they've got a huge, and I think they did even call it out in the article. Their EPO is their bread and butter.
It is. It has been. EPO to me is what's allowed McAfee to survive.
Yeah.
If they can leverage EPO in the cloud and on-premise to hybridize and then bring additional services into the cloud, that's good for them because I think EPO does have some differentiated capabilities over their competition. EPO is kind of the glue that's held McAfee together, and so that it's a smart move. I do believe it's a little late, but we'll see how it goes.
Neustar has acquired Verizon Security Services customer contracts. So basically, Neustar now will take over what was being offered through VeriSign. What did I say? Verizon? VeriSign. VeriSign's. So the DDoS protection, managed DNS firewall, which I'm not sure what that is, and a fee-based recursive DNS service. Okay, that's fine. I mean, that's like Cisco umbrella, right? And so, yeah, they're taking over their VeriSign's, sorry, I said Verizon, VeriSign's security services, which, if you look at that first one, that DDoS protection, that's something Neustar is already a lead in that market. They do that very well.
The new ones here are the managed DNS and the DNS firewall. To me, and I've talked to the VeriSign guys. When we were at Tenable, we were looking at integration of potentially vulnerability data into the DNS firewall offering. So it's a little interesting to me on what's up with VeriSign next, right?
Yeah.
Because the managed DNS service and the DNS firewall seemed to be strategic when I was talking to them a couple years ago on where VeriSign was going. So I'm a little surprised that they sold all that. They didn't sell the business per se, but they sold the contract, so they kind of sold the customers over to Neustar. So now what's next for VeriSign? That was the thing in here for me, because I remember, you know, talking to the teams about these DNS services, and that was a really strategic set of products for them, and they just sold them all to Neustar. So now what? I mean, this makes complete sense for Neustar because they've been in the DDoS game, and adding some capabilities here makes a lot of sense. I'm just like,
why'd they do that?
But now what's VeriSign? What's VeriSign going to do? What's VeriSign going to become? What's next for VeriSign? So that's my open question after this announcement.
NTT Security adds botnet infrastructure detection. This was, I don't know, not very exciting for me. Basically, they use machine learning to detect command and control servers, which are added to NTT Security's blacklist. I don't know. I think you could find more creative solutions for blacklisting that don't require, you know, this level of service. I'd be interested to learn about how they're applying to machine learning to detect command and control servers. But, you know, there's so many threat intelligence feeds out there and platforms that do this really well. I'm not sure what's differentiating their offering. I mean, a blacklisting of IPs and domains is it's pretty well understood and something you can do now at scale. I really like Bandura's approach to allowing organizations to do that at very large scale, as it does help cut down on the noise and prevent some attacks if it's a known, you know, bad IP, and keeping tabs on that. But there's so many ways to implement blacklists in your environment that, I don't know, wouldn't necessarily require services of a lot of organizations.
What I think this is just adding additional capabilities into their managed service offerings, so customers don't have to have their own solution that they manage, right?
Sure.
And so if you think about what the managed security service providers are really focused on now, is adding more capabilities as part of the managed service, so their customers don't have to go buy a solution along with the MSSP to do this. And so it may not sound that sexy from a functionality perspective, but for customers that are using NTT managed services, it's now something else they don't have to do themselves, because now it's part of their offerings. And so it just makes it easier for those customers to leverage more and more out of their MSSPs, right? And I think we're going to continue to see MSSPs add more functionality into their managed services to take on the gaps in the security resource side, and just say, look, we can add some of these additional services. You don't have to worry about managing it yourself. I think we'll see more of these types of announcements of incremental improvements to what's in the MSSP offerings going forward.
Absolutely. That rounds out the news for this week. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching Enterprise Security Weekly. See you next time.